This video will highlight the importance of pollination, who the pollinators are, and how they are threatened. We can thank pollinators for 1 in 3 mouthfuls of food and drink, everything from coffee and chocolate to most fruits and vegetables in our diet. Pollination is also critical for many of the animal products we consume, including dairy products, beef, pork, and poultry. These animals consume insect-pollinated legumes such as alfalfa and clover at some time during their growth. When we start to think about what we ate yesterday for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we start to understand the importance of pollinators in our own diets. The annual income from pollinated crops in the U.S. is quite astounding, over $12.1 billion per year, and that does not include certain crops like citrus, cranberries, or blueberries. Both canola and soybeans will self-pollinate, but production is improved with pollination by bees. Almonds are an interesting crop example. The California almond industry depends almost completely on the pollination services of migratory honeybee hives. An estimated 1.6 million hives are brought into almond orchards for pollination each spring when the almonds are in bloom. California's Central Valley produces almost 2/3 of the world's almond harvest, an estimated 2 billion pounds per year. Some plants, like this Virginia bluebell, can benefit from the pollination services of several different pollinators. Virginia bluebell flowers are pollinated by long-tongued bees primarily, including honeybees, bumblebees, anthophorid bees, mason bees, large leaf-cutting bees, and miner bees. These insects seek nectar and collect pollen. Other visitors of the flower include hummingbirds, bee flies, butterflies, skippers, and the sphinx moth, also including hummingbird moths. This group of visitors seek nectar from the flowers. Small flower flies may also visit the flowers, however they feed on the pollen and are not effective pollinators. This information is from the IllinoisWildflowers.info website. This illustrates that pollinators are not only essential for plant reproduction, but their pollination work provides food for many other birds and mammals. Pollinators also make up a portion of the diet of a variety of other animals. The OregonForest.org website states that fruits and seeds derived from insect pollination are a major part of the diet of approximately 25% of all birds and of mammals ranging from voles to bears to humans. Pollinators are important in a grizzly bear's diet. This is due, in part, to the richness of their diet, which in Yellowstone consists mostly of white bark pine nuts, as well as roots, tubers, grasses, various rodents, emerging army cutworm moss, and scavenged carcasses. Pollination is the transfer of pollen from anthers to stigma. Most plants need pollen from a different plant of the same species for fertilization to take place. Pollination can be abiotic or biotic. Abiotic pollination involves a non-living agent to transfer pollen, such as wind or water. Biotic pollination involves a living being transferring pollen from flower to flower. Pollination is different from fertilization. Pollination is only the transfer of pollen. When fertilization takes place, seeds and fruit can develop. Some flowers require cross-pollination for fertilization to take place. For example, A Cortland apple flower must be pollinated by a compatible apple cultivar that blooms at the same time, such as Empire. Some apples are able to self-pollinate, also called self-fruitful. Apples, pears, sweet cherries, and Japanese plums all require cross-pollination. Cross-pollination is not essential, but does improve the fruit set for apricots, European plums and prunes, tart cherries, peaches, and nectarines. Some plants, including many weeds, are able to self-pollinate if cross-pollination doesn't take place. Many animals serve important roles as pollinators. In some habitats, bats and other small mammals, birds, reptiles, and even larger mammals serve as pollinators. Hummingbirds, butterflies, chipmunks, and honeybees all serve as pollinators. Bees are the most important pollinators for 3 reasons. First, they actively collect and transport pollen. Second, they exhibit flower constancy. Flower constancy means when a bee forages for pollen, it travels from flower to flower of the same species. It will not go from an apple blossom to a dandelion to clover to apple blossom. The next foraging trip, the same bee may go from clover to clover to clover, thus being selective for the same species of flowers on each foraging trip. And thirdly, bees regularly forage in areas around the nest. This is great news for most farmers and gardeners. If nesting sites are provided to encourage native bees or managed colonies of honeybees are kept near the crops that need to be pollinated, bees will forage nearby and help ensure that crop flowers are pollinated. Honeybees are an essential, non-native pollinator insect. They live in colonies that can contain tens of thousands of individual bees. Honeybees can tell time, distinguish flower shape and color, and communicate with their sisters, abilities that have evolved as a means of increasing honeybees' efficiency as flower foragers. Managed hives of the European honeybee can take credit for most crop pollination, but there is trouble in relying on a single pollinator. Honeybees face many problems, including mites, diseases, pesticides, and habitat loss. One important honeybee pest is the varroa mite. Just imagine a mite the size of a dinner plate on your back. These mites weaken bees and vector diseases. Sources say in the U.S., beekeepers have lost approximately 30% of their colonies every year since 2006, with the total annual losses sometimes reaching as high as 42%. Due to pests and pesticides, the feral honeybee population has declined by 70 to 100%. Many native bees are robust in size, such as the bumblebee or carpenter bee, and warm up more quickly in the early mornings and stay out later during cool evenings. Thus, these bees will spend significantly more time per day pollinating plants. Native bees keep honeybees moving. Honeybees tend to linger on flowers, but if they come in contact with a native bee, especially a bee larger than themselves, they will fly to another flower. Most of these native species are solitary bees, unlike the social honeybee. In North America, there are 4,000 plus native species. The Missouri Extension Office reports that researchers have been studying the diversity and abundance of native bee species found in pollinator-dependent crops. Based on their results, they have found between 50 and 100 species of native bee pollinators. Native bees are estimated to provide $3 billion in pollination services per year. Pollinators face many threats, including the loss of habitat for nesting and foraging, the effects of pesticides, pests such as mites and many diseases, the effects of climate change, and pressures from invasive plants. Many of our native bees are also in decline, including several bumblebee species. Of particular importance are members of the subgenus Bombus. This is a closely related group of sister species that range across the country. Once they accounted for some of the most common bees in their range. Now they are nearly impossible to find, especially in agriculture areas. It is suspected that a bee pathogen has spread to wild populations from commercial rearing facilities. Research findings published in Current Biology in 2008 show that from 1961 to 2006, the percentage of global cropland requiring bee pollination increased over 300%. It jumped from 18.2% in 1961 to 34.9% in 2006. To meet the anticipated increases in acreage of bee-pollinated crops over the next decade, America will need approximately another 500,000 honeybee hives. With an aging beekeeper population and declining profit margins, we need honeybees as well as native bees to meet the pollination needs.